Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This is the 57th video in our Master Series, the 27th video in our first phase processing, and the 6th video on equalization. Now, in the last video, we talked about the equal loudness contour, and with all honesty, that it takes some work. And my suggestion, where I really started, it started to really work for me well when I started making presets. I started making presets that really follow the equal loudness contour exactly, and then various degrees of that, then and starting points, like in this vocal with it sat there sounds really good, or it might sound not there, about there, that sounds pretty good, it might need some adjustments, and or way down, you never know, and just and work with it and experiment with it. It's a work in progress that you just have to work with, but it can make any sound really lush and full, and how it's and just good. Just be real careful with synthetic sounds like synthesizers and things like that, and you just mangle the sound with that, because it's not going to do good to it sometimes. Now, when we get done with that, we are going to go through and we are going to go do some more boosting. Now, why I have this step in my process is because in the last step, I am not focusing anywhere except for where the equal loudness contour dictates to boost and subtract to make the sound as good as possible, and the frequency content, all the frequency content being able to be heard well because of being at correct levels, so that some levels aren't drowning out other levels. Does that make sense? Or other frequency content, so it sounds nice and rich and full. But after that, sometimes it doesn't sound exactly quite right, and when that's happening, this may or may not be happening, but you might be listening to the sound and go, well, that sounds pretty good, but it's still it could be boosted over in here. Over in this area, I listen to it, it sounds like something could be boosted. Where? Where is the sound going to be boosted? Start sweeping around. I mean, something sounds like it's a little quiet, like an area it might be your lower end, needs to be boosted a little bit more up in that area. Most of the time what I'm looking for is not areas the equal loudness contour boosted and attenuated. It's other areas that it's not dictated. It might be up here around 5K that for some reason that it just sounds flat, and I'm sweeping around and it's like, yeah, right in that area that it needs to be boosted a little bit, and I'll A/B it back and forth and listen to it. I don't know. Yeah, it does. It boosted right there. It makes it sound better. Does that make sense? And these are areas that the equal loudness contour didn't deal with static, evaluation of how the ear here sounds to try to even out the decibel levels of the content of the sound. That there are other content that you're going to want to boost, and it could be anywhere, and all sounds are different. So the problem is that some sounds that it's going to be a different situation, so you may not have that happening, and you might, but I'll normally go through it and listen to it and go, could it be boosted somewhere? Is this second harmonic around the third harmonic, or in this area? Normally it's a little bit wider Q, but I'll still sweep around with a lesser Q, because most of the time it's static EQ, so I'm going to sweeping around. Yeah, I think down in here it needs to be boosted a little bit, and it's like, it might be on the curve here, somewhere on this curve, that in this sound itself, that it's not taking that in consideration, and it really could be boosted right in that area. It's in between, you've got that going up between 5 and 10K, but right there it could be boosted a little bit, and then that really, oh yeah, that sounds really good because of the inherent nature of this sound and the harmonic content. You might have one of those nodes, you might have two of those nodes, or three of those nodes. I don't know. Normally it's, at most, I've had one or two areas where I'll go through and want to boost. I'll go, no, right around there it needs to be boosted. I'll A/B it back and forth. Yeah, no, and really it takes some time. This is something that takes some time, because with experience that you get better at hearing that, and hearing the envelope of sound needs to be worked on and needs to be adjusted, in this vocal that might do really well. In another vocal you might not do anything, or it might be over here that you want to boost just a little bit. Or does that make sense? Because of the sounds are different. So it takes some practice, and you really got to work on hearing issues. You're having a problem with some area and you can hear it. It's like, no, it sounds a little bit flat, but I'm not sure where it is. With experience, you'll probably be able to target it a little bit better. But as you get that experience, it can sometimes take a lot of sweeping around. You're like, well, I hear something. What is it? You know, it's over in here. No, is it up in the upper end? And sometimes a little time consuming until you can target it. And it's like, oh, yeah, right there. Yeah. And then you're A-Bing it back and forth. Yeah, no, yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's doing it. And it will just take time as you get better at doing it, and you'll get better at targeting it, and you'll get better at finding it. So it's just something you really need to experiment with so that you can become better at doing it. And it's not really, these steps, none of them are all that complicated except for the equal loudness contour work that we talked about, but it's probably the most important work. But, you know, I hate to say any part is more important than the other, because the overall effect of all this work is what makes it a good equalization job, working with static equalization work. So after you get done with this step, and you've swept around trying to find any areas that might need to be boosted also that weren't taken into consideration with equal loudness contour because of inherent sound and that specific sound, then we go back and the same work we did in the second step. So if you remember the second step, we're doing the same work here. We're doing high and low pass filtering and any notch filtering that we may need to do. We may go through there, and after we do our high and low pass filtering, we might find some area, you know, does it sound like something needs to be attenuated? You know, man, maybe there, you might find some areas, really listening intently and taking your time and learning to hear issues that is going to make it sound better, A-Bing it back and forth, that to go through and do that step again and do a good job at it. And then when you get done, the same thing as in the first step, putting that high and low pass brick filter on up at your extreme upper end and lower end to stop any intermodulation distortion, any frequency content that might have been created while you were equalizing and things like that, to just kind of wrap up your equalization work. Now, each one of these steps that we talked about in equalization process are just as important as every other step. And you will find if you really work at doing each one of these steps really well, that you will find that your equalization work becomes phenomenal. When I'm doing now, I'll give you an example like a vocal. I get a vocal or something like that, and I'd start my process of my equalization, I've found that besides my sound sculpting, that it's one of the most important steps in my processing because it affects the audio most significantly, because I have a capture of a vocal, and it's, you know, I captured it through a decent microphone, did a good job of it like we talked about in recording, and I did a good job of editing and all the stuff up to this point. But when I do a good job of equalizing on it, and I do make sure I do a real good job of it and do it properly and correctly and really take my time to do as good a job as possible, that it just sounds phenomenal. It sounds clean, it sounds clear, it sounds lush and full, and just, it's the difference between night and day. I've done this kind of stuff to vocals that I've gotten. I'll give you an example. I did some of this work. Somebody was like questioning it, and I was like, well, send me a track, any track. I don't care what it is, and I'll do it on your whole mix, and it was like, I did this process to, I think it was a Fleetwood Mac song called Rihanna. And he sent me the track, and he was like, okay, well, let's hear what you do with it. And I did all this work to it on Rihanna, just the whole mix, the old Fleetwood Mac song. And it was like listening it between an old 57 Studebaker and a current Ferrari. I mean, that was the quality difference, just with equalization. I didn't do any other work to it. I just did this process to it with equalization, and it sounded phenomenal. The whole mix sounded 100% better. It was lush, it was full, it was just clean as I could get it with the work that I did on it, and it was beautiful. I mean, the guy was like, couldn't believe it. He was like, I can't even believe it. I just sent you this MP3, or he sent me a WAV file, and I can't believe he took it off a CD, and he was like, I can't even believe how good that sounds. That's unbelievable. And it's amazing. And that kind of work later on your whole mix can make your mix just shine. So it's really a huge important step, and it's really important to do as good a job as possible on it, because it is most assuredly one of the most important steps you have in your first phase processing to make sure that this individual track sounds as good as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this step on equalization and the things we've spoken of, and I certainly hope you start experimenting with that. And feel free to get a hold of me if you have some questions that you need to get a little more detailed information or information on equal loudness contours and things. I'd be happy to answer your questions. But the biggest thing is that you got to experiment, getting some vocals, make some vocals, get some, tracks from, mixing contests and things like that, and begin experimenting with it. You'll be surprised what phenomenal, positive effect it will have on anything you do, or any track or any sound or any capture you have, if you do a really good job at it. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed this next step in our first phase processing, and I'll see you in the next video.